Welcome to The Facts. I'm Rosalyn Tavanis. Since the U.S. Capitol insurrection, 33 state legislators have introduced over 160 bills that would restrict voters' access to the ballot, reported by the Brennan Center for Justice. This rash of new, more restrictive voting laws comes as a result of Donald Trump's squeals that the 2020 election was fraudulent. Republicans have answered his call by passing more restrictive voter laws. Some of these new restrictions include allowing partisan voting officials more control over election results, potentially allowing these officials to overturn results, limiting the use of ballot drop boxes, adding 10 requirements for those requesting absentee ballots, outlawing laws that allow automatic registration for absentee voting, and requiring picture IDs for voters. Last week, Texas got their way in their new voting bill called SB 7. Not only does this law include the aforementioned restrictions, but also encompasses escalating punishments for mistakes or offenses by election officials and banning both drive-through voting and 24-hour voting. Georgia's new voting restrictions actually include making it unlawful to distribute drinking water within certain boundaries of polling stations. In Iowa, the new laws will reduce the period for early voting and in-person voting hours on Election Day. Montana has eliminated same-day registration and also requires voters to show a photo ID. In the real world, not the warped Republican reality, the incidence of voter fraud is minuscule. A voter fraud study done by MIT spanning 20 years revealed in April 2020 the percentage of mail-in voting fraud is 0.00006% chance. The Heritage Foundation shows 1,120 convictions of voter fraud since 1992, 1,120 out of hundreds of millions of voters spanning 30 years. So why then is there so much concern about voter fraud, resulting in 160 new restricting voting laws? Most of these new voting laws target two basic groups, minorities and Democrats. Minorities, as so many are poor, and most of minority voting is with the Democrats. Many of these new laws have been voted on in our southern states. The Supreme Court case of Shelby County versus Holder in 2013 questions the constitutionality of a portion of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The portion in question is the watchdog role of the federal government to watch the southern states and search for laws enacted against voting rights, as is their practice. In its decision, the Supreme Court found this practice unconstitutional and archaic, stating that these practices do not occur anymore, which obviously is untrue. On the converse, the Democrats have authored and passed in the House two voting rights bills, both supporting voting rights for citizens of the United States. The For the People Act is a broad-based bill. It is so-called as it addresses state voting and election laws and mandating federal voting practices such as automatic and same-day voting registration, easily available early voting, and prohibiting unnecessary vote roll purges and partisan gerrymandering. The John Lewis Act restores and creates procedural rules governing voting rights violations by the states. Also, it allows private parties or the federal government to make court action to challenge discriminating voting laws. This means that the states with a history of voter discrimination must have any new voting laws reviewed by the federal government. These issues were originally a part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, as cited earlier, and were struck down by the conservative Supreme Court, stating these laws were obsolete. We all know that these issues are still a part of the fabric that makes up the United States. Partisan gerrymandering and discriminatory voting laws targeted toward disenfranchising minorities run rampant. These issues were addressed in the original Voting Rights Act. Since that time, these laws worked to help all citizens to vote easily and without discrimination. My question is this: are we still a democratic republic if the right to vote, cited in our Constitution, becomes more and more restrictive to the citizens of the United States? Thanks for watching. I'm Rosalyn Tavanis.